Have you figured out how to sell on Amazon, but you're ready to grow? If that's you, then you got to stick around. We've got some great content for you. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the ins and outs of a repricer, but we're going to go much deeper. We're going to go beyond that because the concepts that go beyond growing your business have so much to do with how you approach things like tasks, how you're spending your time and making sure you don't waste it, things like that. There's just so much that goes into that. And we got a special guest here that's going to help us, all of us, including me, guys. So this is not going to be a quick video because the value, it cannot be brought to you in 5 minutes. So you want to buckle up. I'll probably have the producer Jim put some markers in there so that if you have to come back, but you're going to want all of this information. Why? Well, it may seem obvious, but the thing of it is if you want to grow your business, you're going to have to learn how to properly conceptualize the approach. So with us today, we have the founder of goAura, which is a repricing software, and his name is Dillon Carter. So thanks for joining us, Dillon.
Yeah, man.
Man, I just want to say before we turn it over to you, and again, working class hustlers, I'm here right along with you guys. I'm here to learn. Guys, if you're really ready to actually grow your business, you have to surround yourself with the thinking that goes beyond where you are. You don't know what you don't know. That's just a fact. And that includes me. I am so thankful and grateful. This guy is worth his weight in gold. And so without further ado, we're going to get right into some of his main concepts. Guys, understand this is going to be part of a series. This guy is giving of himself for our benefit. So let's take advantage so that we can all grow. So once again, Dillon, thanks so much for joining us, man. It is a true honor and a privilege to have you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. So, all right. So we're going to geek out for sure.
Yes, sir.
If anybody's ever seen me talk, that's all I do is geek out. So I'm going to try to weave this plot line, if you will, right? We're going to take this in a few different ways.
Okay.
I kind of want to start with repricing as a concept, just generally speaking, like what is it? Why do you need all these kind of things? And very importantly, when do you need it? And we'll kind of jump into different like hoops throughout, right? We'll talk about how you're spending your time and some more like strategic things when it comes to running an Amazon business. To give some a brief background, I used to run a wholesale Amazon business. Then me and my co-founder James launched goAura. And we've been running with that ever since, so I'm not a seller anymore, but I'm well versed in it. I've been doing it for a while. Okay, so repricing, what is it? All repricing tools, all they really do is they look at your current listings, the current situation. And by situation, I mean, units available, total number of competitors, all these things, BSR, right? And then they say, okay, based on where things are at now, do I need to change my price? And by doing that, can I increase your sales? Mm-hmm. And it's not just sales, right? We care about profitability as well, right? Because basic economics, I can tank all your prices and increase your sales and you're not really going to be happy. Right. So when you're getting started as a seller, there's a lot of things that you don't need, right? It's very easy. And listen, we all fall into this trap of, we get started, we're like, hey, cool. What tools do I need? And everybody says, oh, I use this, I use that. And you end up with like $1,500 a month in tools. And you're like, dude, I don't even have inventory, right? Like, how does this make sense? It doesn't. So there's two broad categories when you look at tools in the Amazon space. You have efficiency-based tools and effectiveness-based tools. The vast majority of the things that you are using are efficiency-based tools. Think about Jungle Scout, Helium 10, right? These are great tools, but they amplify the things that you're currently doing, right? They make you more efficient. So here's the thing. When you're getting started, you don't need a lot of tools. You need to focus on getting effective first. Why? Well, if you focus on efficiency first, you become efficiently ineffective. Doesn't really make sense, right? It's like if you don't know how to source, but you're getting a tool to help you source, it's not making you source better. It's helping you do the same level of sourcing quicker, right? So when I was doing wholesale, all the sourcing I did was manual. And a lot of people are like, this makes no sense for your time, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but I'm getting really good at it to the degree that I can spend 4 hours and come out with 10 new brands. like really good, right? So I sourced manually for the first like 2 years with that business, and then eventually got Jungle Scout because I'm like, now I know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have effectiveness-based tools, right? Repricing really fits in that mold. Why? It literally, without like more work from you, makes you more money, right? So it's not just saying, hey, I'm going to help you do something better. It's saying, I'm going to do it for you entirely, right? So and let's talk about real quick, like when do you need a repricing tool? When do you not? Because this is very, very obvious.
Yes.
Or it seems obvious, but like when you're
But
a new
it's
seller,
a
it's not.
question that a lot of people are going to
Yeah.
have. And I'm glad you're touching on this because there's a value that you have to see. A lot of people will forego a tool like this,
Yeah.
and they tend to default to the other types of tools you were describing that
Yes.
don't automate anything.
Exactly. So for me, waiting too long is bad, and also jumping in too quick is just as bad, right? So for me, what we tend to see is if you're over 25 SKUs like consistently, or $5,000 a month in sales consistently, and by consistent, I would say the last 2 to 3 months. If you're hitting that, yeah, you need to start considering one. If you're beneath that, you don't need a repricing tool, because here's what's going to happen. If you don't have like any inventory, I have nothing to really reprice, right?
Right.
So, and this brings up a broader question, which is, a lot of people think that repricing is a silver bullet. It's certainly not, right? It's hyper effective, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, if you've got terrible inventory, repricing tool ain't going to help you. Like, sorry, if you're paying $50 and the buy box is at 25, I can't help you, right? Straight up, you're losing money. So for me, it's like when you really start to understand sourcing, and you're like, okay, I get it now. Now I just need to really scale it up and stuff. Now is when you need to start saying, okay, I'm going to scale up my inventory levels. What else needs to scale up, right? What are the things that come? What are the tasks or problems that come with scaling up my inventory? Well, it's also sales, right? Because you managing your pricing for 10 SKUs, once every few hours, not that big of a deal, to be honest. But listen, once you have 100, 200, 300 SKUs, now it's a problem. And now it's not worth your time, right? Like Aura, as an example, is $97 a month, right? If we're doing 250,000 price changes per minute for $97 a month, right? Like you're really just not needing to do that task anymore. This is a sub penny task, right? So what you want to do, and let's kind of generalize out here, is what you want to do is you want to say, okay, I got inventory figured out. I just really need to, again, I want to scale it up. Okay. We need to put systems in place that enable you to scale.
Mm-hmm.
People think that scaling is good by itself. There's always a caveat. You can scale too fast, 1000%, right? If you're like, hey, I really want to grow the company, fantastic. Go hire 5 people. You're going to figure out really quickly, I have no training, right? I have no SOPs. I don't know how to teach them anything. I don't even know, I haven't clarified the roles. And then you realize I need to fire everybody and start from scratch. You scale too fast. You can do the same thing with inventory, right? Because what ends up happening is, let's say you got 10 grand in capital. Awesome. You go and you spend it, but you're doing nothing to ensure that that sell-through rate is high, meaning that you're super liquid. And so what ends up happening is you run out of capital, but you got all this great inventory sitting there. And now you're like, well, I have the time, I know how to source, but I don't have the capital. So I'm going to go raise money, or I'm going to go take on a partner, or, go take on some debt. And what you realize, I do a decent amount of one-on-ones from time to time, just kind of like deep dive into people's businesses and kind of seeing what's going on. And a lot of times it's like, hey, I want to raise 20 grand. I'm like, all right, let's have that discussion. And you look at the inventory, it's like, you could free up 20 grand right now without taking on any debt, without giving up any equity. And what that comes down to is your sell-through rate, right? So listen, I've been in the Amazon communities on Facebook, all these things, I get it. We're constantly shown super high ROIs, especially with RA and OA, right? Because it's like, oh my God, this was insane.
Right.
My retort to seeing those every single time when people are like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, I wish I could get that. I'm like, can you do it 10,000 times in a month? If you get a 600% ROI one time, it's cool, but it's not that cool, because you can't build a business on one-offs, right? Amazon's a volume game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more impressed by somebody who can get 30% ROI on 10,000 units a month consistently. That's way more impressive, right? So you got to understand that because Amazon's not a flipping game like eBay, it's a volume game. You need to understand that your sell-through rate is incredibly important. So how do you increase your sell-through rate? Well, get in the buy box, right? 82 something, it kind of hovers, but roughly 82% of organic sales come in through the buy box by itself. So if a seller goes, how do I increase my sales? Well, you can get more inventory, which is valid. You should always be doing that. And actually, you should increase your buy box percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Done. Like that's how you do it. That's the silver bullet, right? So then the next question is, well, how do I increase the percentage of time I'm in the buy box? That's where repricing comes in.
That's where,
because again, time consuming. It's super time consuming. You cannot be sitting there and just hitting, match buy box, match buy box. It doesn't work that way, right? And there's more advanced strategies that a lot of people don't talk about. And we can kind of shift gears into a few of the repricing myths that we're all told in the Facebook groups as new sellers, which are completely wrong. I used to believe them until I started a repricing tool.
Let me make sure I keep the hustlers on point here, because we're talking about some very important things, guys. We need to unpack this for a second. When Dillon is talking about these concepts, we got to step back and make sure you guys are doing this business. What he's talking about is, how long is that inventory sitting there?
Yes.
Because you're going to get to a point where you physically cannot keep up with the price changes that are happening on Amazon. Mm-hmm. We could ask Dillon, how often are prices changing? It's going to be a ridiculous number. And if you want to grow your business, we got to make sure we stand on track, hustlers. This is about you growing your business. In order to do that, what did Dillon say? You got to stay in that buy box. How do you stay in the buy box? You have to be competitive. To be competitive, you gotta change with the prices. Okay. If you do not, you simply will not be able to grow. Yeah. It cannot happen. Yeah. So I just want to keep them on track. And so I want
to go deeper into that too, because I'm glad you paused me here, because there's something important that I learned that actually changed the game for my business. You can spend 10 grand in like once in a month, or you can spend that same 10 grand twice in a month.
Wow.
Let's unpack that for a second.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm coming at this from wholesale, but it works for RA, OA just as well.
Okay.
I'm going to stick with wholesale because it's a little cleaner analogy. Mm-hmm. Let's say I have enough inventory available to purchase, right? I kind of have to make that assumption for this to work. Right. I've got 10 grand cash. I can buy 10 grand worth of inventory that's going to sell through in 30 days. Okay. At the end of 30 days, I get my 10 grand back plus my profit. Let's call it 30% ROI. It's pretty good. Or I can spend my 10 grand a little bit more wide. And by wide, I mean like SKUs. Mm-hmm. I'm getting less units per SKU, but more SKUs. Why? I'm making sure that I'm selling through all the inventory within 2 weeks, not 4 weeks, 2 weeks. So what ends up happening, this is just a compound equation. Okay. I spend 10 grand within the first week and 2 weeks. I get my 10 grand back plus my profits. Going into week 3, I spend the 10 grand plus my profits again, right? And then by week 4, I've spent 20 grand.
Right.
So here's the thing: when you look at the math, and it's a compound equation, right?
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. So I want to go deeper yet again. Again, ROI, everybody loves it. You cannot look at the ROI isolated. You can't just be like 30%, that's great. Is it? I don't know. How many units are you moving, right? How quickly are you moving your velocity here, right? So for me, it's not just 30% is better. Not necessarily true. What if I can lower my ROI from 30% to 20%, but I can increase my volume of sales by 30%? I made more money in total. This is managerial accounting 101. Listen, if I can recommend anything, just go buy a managerial accounting book. That will change the game for you. Because all you're doing is you're laying out 2 scenarios and you're running the math and you're seeing which one actually makes more sense, which one's more financially, feasible or profitable. And, so for me, again, I don't care about your ROI, right? So for a lot of people that are, I've always said you're in 2 phases with an Amazon business, right? The first phase, and it's sequential. First phase is you got some money, if not a lot of money. If you got a lot of money, that's fantastic. You're doing better than the rest of us getting started. But you got that, but not much inventory. That's your biggest problem. You got to figure out how to get good, consistent inventory, right? But then eventually you get pretty good at inventory. So then you go to phase 2. Phase 2 is I know how to get inventory. My problem is I don't have enough capital to spend. I got to a point with my wholesale business. I was like, if I took in another 30 grand cash right now, I could spend it in the next 30 days profitably. It's a good position to be in, but it's still a problem, right? And what you realize is a lot of sellers hit that plateau way too soon. And the reason you find out is because they're holding inventory far too long. Opportunity cost is a thing. Just because you spent, $40 on a product and now the buy box is at 35 does not mean you should hold it. Take your $5 loss and go redeploy your $35 into something that's going to make money more consistently. I see this 9 times out of 10, right? I look at people's inventory. They've been holding a product for 60 days. They're like, but I'm trying to break even. You already lost. What you could have done instead of trying to break even is taken the L, redeploy that capital you did get back, and assuming you could sell, new profitable inventory every 2 weeks, you made more money, right? So you got to think more strategically about your inventory, guys. This is not just pricing. Pricing is definitely a part of this equation here, but I want you to understand the way I'm approaching repricing is from a more holistic perspective of the business. It's a key variable that you put in place to make things very effective and efficient, right? This, we're talking about we're talking about the what and the why and stuff, but repricing becomes the how to do that. Obviously, you have to make smart buying decisions with your inventory, but guess what? The better your inventory buying decisions are, the better the repricing is going to do.
But
it's incredible.
You know what, Dillon? This harkens me back to when I first discovered you a long time ago when you were doing podcasts.
Right.
What you were doing was changing my thinking, because first you have to have your concepts in order. And you'll notice on my channel, I talk about 20% ROIs all the time because I can turn that quicker. While the rest of the world, especially in arbitrage, wants to brag about a 500% return on investment, and yet that product,
but they're doing
the money back. Guys,
a month in revenue.
Hustlers, you gotta stay with this guy, stay with him, because you have to understand, why are we doing this? We're trying to control the buy box. Why? Because we can sell the product faster. Why? Because we can get that capital back. Why? Because we can compound it, come back. Guys, who's out here teaching us, hey, instead of thinking in terms of what can I do in 30 days, what can I turn in 15 and do double while compounding? I mean, that's amazing.
Right. Right. And listen, sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? This is not binary, right? There's always going to be exceptions. Sometimes you get such a great discount by buying more inventory with wholesale that it makes sense, right? So don't get me wrong. There's always exceptions here. Okay, so we get where I'm coming from with all this now.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some repricing myths, right? A lot of people are hesitant to get started. There's a few things here. I really want to unpack this race to the bottom price war.
Let's do it.
Concept.
That is huge.
Listen, I believed it because I was told that by more seasoned sellers when I got started. Okay. Simple fact is they're wrong. Okay. We are very opinionated about this. Why? Because we have the most data on repricing. Okay. Right. So, here's what's interesting, right? You have people that have great businesses, and that's awesome. And they're like, I do it this way. Okay. That does not mean that is the only or the best way to do it. So when we started to grow in terms of the number of sellers using goAura, and now it's thousands, right? Okay. We started to notice, wait, the data says something completely different than what we thought. And what the data showed was, if you reprice below by penny, you win. Which, all right, we kind of get that, right? But
wait, say that again. You win if what?
If you reprice below by penny.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go deeper into this, okay?
Okay.
Because a lot of people hear that and they freak out. There is a caveat. Okay, listen, if you were just repricing below by a penny and that's it in a discussion, yeah, I'm hey, there's some other things we could do, and we're going to talk about those. Okay. We are a big fan of the oscillation strategy, and I'll break that down. Very simple. An oscillation is just a wave, right? It goes up and down. We basically want to do that with the price, right? So I have some sellers that jump into repricing for the first time, and they're like, hey, I want to increase the volume of my sales, and I want to increase the net profitability. No. Why? Economics. That's not how economics works, right? Right. Try it on any product on Amazon. That's not how this works, right? But there's a sweet spot, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. Okay, so how do you increase? Let's just focus on the volume. How do you increase the volume of sales? We know, factually speaking, that if you lower your price, you get in the buy box. By being in the buy box, you get more sales.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you want to increase your volume of sales, you need to reprice below by a penny. But that's not everything. What if we can't increase the net profitability, but what if we can at least have a good, like, solid average, right? Let's say it's been doing $10 per unit and we want to hold the average around there, not every unit, but the average. Okay, how do we do that? We can take our price from our minimum price once we hit it by repricing below to our max price and restarting that process. Hence the oscillation, right? Going down increases volume, going back to the top resets your average net profit per unit. So yeah, you're going to get some sales at $20, but you're also going to get some in the 19 range, but also you're going to get some in the 21 range. So what you end up doing is being able to increase the volume by holding the average net profit per unit. Now, sometimes it lowers, but why is that bad? Because again, the example I gave earlier, what happens when I lower your price by 15 cents or 50 cents? Heck, you know what? Let's go $1. Okay. I lower your price by $1 on all your sales for that SKU, thousands of units as an example, but I increase the volume of your sales by 20%. You made more money in the same period of time. And the time value of money, I'm a finance major, so I use weird terms like that. Real thing, right? $1 today is very important. And so a lot of sellers get stuck with this idea of pricing down is bad. Guys, no, it's not. Listen, it is so much more impactful for wholesale when you have thousands of units per SKU like I did. When you're doing RA and OA, where most of your SKUs you're going to have less than 10 units per SKU, right? Oh gosh, I did a last night, and someone was like, "Hey, does this work with one-off SKUs?" Right? I got a ton of SKUs, but I only ever have one unit of a SKU. It's even better. Why? Because by the time I lower your price or begin to do that, the percentage of time you need to be in the buy box to sell that unit is so slim compared to what I would need for wholesale. Right? So if I can increase your percentage of time, or let's just say I take you 15 minutes a day into the buy box. That 15 minutes might be enough to sell that unit. But here's the thing, I'm not lowering you by $5, right? We're not giving up that much upside. What I'm doing is I might lower you by 20 cents. So you have to get comfortable with this idea that taking $45 today is better than $46 3 weeks from now.
Yeah. And like, you'll notice with my audience, I teach them, quit looking at one item.
Yes.
Quit looking at one item and how much did I make on that item? Start looking at what was my budget.
Yes.
Total. What did I put out? What did I get back? Total. Quit looking at each unit, because that's where you get caught up in minutia, and you can't think big enough, because you got to think, you know, like you keep talking. Okay, if I had a $10,000 budget, how quick can I get that 10,000 back? You're not saying, well, what can I do to get this amount on this item? You ain't got time for that. You got to start thinking, you know, and this is what that concept in and of itself could change somebody if they did nothing else but be willing to give up some ROI in exchange for velocity, sales velocity. That in and of itself will, you know.
Right. And that's the thing, right? We never talk about this in our industry for some reason, right? It's always like, what's the ROI? And I've talked with sellers and they're like, I don't take anything less than 100%. I'm like, and you are missing out on volume. I can tell you don't do 7 figures. Wow. Right. And like, and it's not because you can't find those deals and they don't exist. They do. But heck, if you're willing to put that much effort into finding those deals, imagine hiring somebody to focus on the not so great deals and still, right? You know, it's like, listen, if you got cash in the bank that you can't spend right now, I had this exact problem when I was getting started. I was growing. I was figuring out wholesale, how to have, you know, relationships and figure these things out. And so I had some cash sitting around while I was trying to find great products, and I had some decent products. So I was like, well, you know, let's say I got $2,000. I don't have anything great to spend it on now, but if I find something that's great tomorrow, could I punt that for 2 weeks? Yeah, it'd be fine. It won't hurt me. So why don't I buy something for 5% ROI rather than getting nothing on it, right? We don't think about these things, right? A lot of people will be like, well, I don't want to buy it because it's not that great. Well, what's your alternative? Well, I'm trying to figure that out. It's like, right, but you have a known right now, right? I'm not saying go drop all your cash into it and like hold it for 3 months. That'd be dumb.
Right.
But listen, would you rather accept 5% ROI or 0% ROI? Right. And then when you can trade 5% for 20%, you do it. I remember I didn't want to raise money, right? So I got to a point where I'm spending all my cash every single month as quickly as I can, right? Churning, I'm getting new accounts too. And I was like, well, I don't want to take on, any partners or any debt. So I was like, well, let me go replace my lowest ROI SKUs with a better one, right? Because I keep getting new accounts. So I'd be like, oh, that one's 12%. It's not great, but guess what? I got a 4%. I just been, keeping it along because why not swap it out, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the efficiency of my capital, right? So eventually you get to a point where you start having a discussion of, well, I know where I tend to average. Let's say I average 20%. Well, what I want to focus on instead of raising money is I want to get that from 20 to 25%. I want my capital to be more efficient, right? I want more cash to come back to me every time I send it out. And then you get to 30, right? So you can kind of play that game for sure, but you cannot play that game if you don't have systems in place for scale, right? When I started with the Amazon business, I knew, and the way I approached it was my process, my infrastructure, if you will, needed to be able to sustain 50,000 units as well, as it could 50 units. Okay. I did not want to have any bottlenecks in my infrastructure. The only bottlenecks I wanted to design, which was capital and my time. So I can control these, right? And that led me to working with like a prep center and things like that, right? And so what's great is when you have repricing as a pillar in your business, let's say, you're doing OA, and then you're gonna have all your inventory shifted to a prep center. You're gonna pay them per unit. So you don't have to touch it because it's not worth your time prepping. And then they're gonna list it. And then when it gets live, Goara's gonna reprice it. That sounds simple, but let's break that down. Okay. There's a lot of things actually happening.
Right.
What you were doing is you were spending like 80+% of your time, which you should be on the things that really matter, which is sourcing and getting inventory, AKA feeding that beast, right? So what happens when you spend 80% of your time on just sourcing inventory and making buying decisions? You get money. Really good at it. And you get good at it, right? Yeah. Because that's the only thing you're doing. Practice makes perfect. But what you're doing is you're also taking two other segments of your flow, if you will, right? Prepping and then getting the sales to actually occur. And you're putting those at the back of your mind, but they're still happening. There's well, I hate to use the term famous because he's a mathematician, but a famous mathematician. I forget his name, of course, but basically I'm going to paraphrase, but basically he says civilization advances at the rate at which it can put operations in the background. Business is that same thing, right? So let's talk about the difference between building a business and a company. A business is a job that you create for yourself, which is awesome, right? There's no one is better than the other here, but I want to clearly define both because I want you to understand that you have the option here. Right. Most Amazon businesses are businesses in the way that I'm describing them. It's you don't really have any systems. You just know you do some things and like make some money. That's awesome, right? And maybe you scale that up and you make some really good money. Right. But things do not exist outside of you. Let's talk about that for a second. You want to clarify the roles, the tasks, the things that are worth doing, the things that are not worth doing, right? We're looking at impact of your time, ROI, right? You want to lay out everything. I mean, heck, I'm a visual person, so I literally like draw these things. Okay. Right. I'm like, what? I'm like, I draw out all the things that need to happen, all the workflows that I do, all the tasks. And I go, okay, are there odd departments that kind of exist? Yeah, kind of. Okay. So, I have a sourcing department, I have a prep department, and then I have a everything else kind of department, right? Okay, let's look at those things and let's clarify, how do I measure my success here? How do you measure your success with sourcing? It's not just dollars spent. Maybe it's, dollars spent plus average ROI on sales for that inventory. So you're getting good, right? If you see those numbers, if you're like, last month I spent 20 grand instead of the previous month I spent 10, and I kept the same ROI. It's pretty good. But what are you doing? You're clarifying the role. And what you're doing is you're writing out these guides, these SOPs, and they don't have to be crazy complex, just simple. Here's how I do things, right? What I'm doing is I'm trying to turn these things into routines that I can sit down and just crank out left and right. But even better, when I get to a point where I see an opportunity to hire somebody, I can go, hey, I've already made this process dramatically better. I've clarified how to measure success, and I've written everything that I know about this down. When I hire somebody, they have all those resources ready to go.
Okay.
So here's what's great. When you do that, you're able to shift your focus away from that world, still make sure that it gets done, right? You've got these KPIs, right? These key performance indicators, and focus more and more of your time on the things that matter. Why do I bring this up? You can do that same process with software. This is when you start having the conversation of efficiency and effectiveness, right? So you want, as a business owner, especially being a small business, to be able to say, what are the things that matter, that have to get done? What are the things that sound cool and like are time consuming, but really don't have an impact? Let's get rid of those things and let's focus on the former, right? And then let's look at how can I best get those things done? And even better, how can I get those things done without me having to get those things done? Right. Software comes into play time and time again. For me, the process I'm going through in my head is like, how do I get 3 humans worth of work done without working 80 hours a week? You got to ask these tough questions, right? Because you start asking interesting questions, you get interesting answers. So, you know, for me, repricing is not just this tool, right? It's like, I've already proven like, it's this whole other world that we're talking about, right? I'm talking like strategy and growth, right? And like, it's a key fundamental thing that like slides in there nice and beautifully, man. You know, we could definitely talk strategy and workflows and automation and like get more tactical here, but generally speaking, I need you to understand how you need to be approaching and viewing the business itself, right? And understanding you can build a company. A company exists outside of you. A company is clear, knows where it's going. It has momentum behind it.
True. Another thing I like that you brought out, and hustlers, you really need to pay attention to this. What Dillon is getting us to focus on, and I need to hear this too, you know, because I'm going to be honest, I'm a hands-on kind of guy, and I kind of like doing everything. But just because you like to do it, that doesn't mean that that's the best use of your time, and that's your most valuable resource. You make money when you buy. That is probably the most important thing, because the inventory is the lifeblood of your Amazon business. And if you can spend, I didn't even think about it this way, if you can spend 80% of your time sourcing, you're going to get better at it and you're going to have more of it. Getting better at sourcing, having more inventory as a result of spending your time doing that, you have to grow your business because you're automating everything that you can automate. So guys, this is very, very much conceptual. We started this video, and of course it's about the repricing software, but in order to effectively use it, we need to be on the right thought patterns here. We got to be approaching this in the right way. This is a great thing we got going here. I'm getting something.
Good.
I realize
I want to pay
using my time right.
Well, I want to paint a picture, right? Because we all go through these phases where there's so much to get done. It's overwhelming. And like, listen, most Amazon sellers, when they're getting started and well into running their Amazon business, they have full-time jobs, right? Like you got a lot on your plate.
I'm one of them.
Right. I mean, same, right? Like when I started, I was a personal trainer and was in school full-time. So didn't have a whole lot of time. Like I get it. And I kind of had to learn that the hard way, but I'll send you the link for this after via email. Because I forget his last name, but basically it's like how to be an effective executive. And like I boiled this thing down, right? It's this VC guy, and it's fantastic. And 3 most important things. And these are not. And then what you want to do is once you have those 3 things, you want to allocate 80% of your time to doing those things, execution. The third thing is you want to say, okay, well, what are the bottlenecks that would keep me from accomplishing these 3 things? And then you spend 20% of your time removing those bottlenecks.
Okay.
we're focusing here on what is effective, right? A lot of people, listen, I'm Mr. Efficiency, I'm Mr. Automation, I'm here for it, but never at the exclusion of effectiveness. Effectiveness always comes first, right? So let me paint this picture for what your business could look like. Every day, you have, let's say, 4 hours to allocate to working on your business.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit down to work on it, you know exactly what you need to do. You sit down, you have it clearly laid out. You set a timer for 4 hours, make sure you don't go over.
Mm-hmm.
And you do a single task. Do that repeatedly, right? You're deeply focused on this thing, and that's sourcing, right? That's what you're going to spend your time on doing. And then the last 20 minutes of that 4 hour time, you take a look at a dashboard. Maybe it's Seller Central, maybe it's something you built yourself, and you look at KPIs that you built, right? KPIs are just key performance indicators, right? It's how you measure success.
Mm-hmm.
That might be revenue, that might be average net profit. It's up to you, right? Success is measured by yourself. And the next day you do the same thing. And the next day the same thing, next day the same thing. At no point were you in your Seller Central account tweaking listings, updating your pricing, prepping inventory, none of this mundane things that have to get done, but don't actually provide value. So here's what you can get to. You understand where you provide the most value as the founder, sourcing.
Yes.
And you put 80% of your time there. And you've created this system on the back end that handles everything the way you would want it to be handled.
Mm-hmm.
Great example. I already kind of highlighted this, but let's go over it again. I prep, I buy. Everything gets shipped to a prep center. Mm-hmm. They handle all that for me and they list it for me on Inventory Lab. Then when that gets imported into my Aura account, Aura via a workflow is just an automation rule that you can create. It says, hey, for every new SKU, I want you to apply this strategy and I want you to toggle repricing on. Then, because we're integrated with Inventory Lab, we import your costs. You're via your strategy here, automatically setting your min prices. So you ensure you make at least that minimum, right? 10, 15, 20%, it's up to you. So what happened? All I did was hit buy and maybe notify my prep center because usually you kind of have to do that.
Right.
Everything else happened for me.
Wow.
You got to think through, right? You need to visualize what are the mechanisms here? What are the different components of the business? Which ones are worth your time? And then taking section, like component by component, understanding it, optimizing it, and then handing it over, whether to a computer or whatever, right? Same thing I did with support, right? I did Aura support as a founder for the first 2 years. Myself on top of everything else. Why? Because I wanted it to get really, really good. And then I said, hey, we need to hire somebody. We hired Finn. Within 2 weeks, when Finn was doing it, actually within like a week and a half, Finn was doing it by himself, crushing it, has been crushing it, right? And all I need to do is step in every now and then on some exceptional situations. And I have a dashboard that I can pull up at any time because we have set KPIs, right? Customer satisfaction rating needs to be above 95%. Average response time during business hours needs to be less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
If those are hit, no conversation needs to be had. Let's move on. Right? And this is the difference between building a business and a company. Because eventually, even in that wonderful situation I gave you, you get really good at sourcing. Why not hire somebody? You can only spend 4 hours of your time. Could you pay somebody for 4 hours of their time on top? Now you're spending 8 hours in total a day sourcing.
Imagine
right?
the return on that.
Yes. And listen, if you don't have capital restrictions because that churn rate is so high, right? Because you're not moving inventory every 30 days, you're moving it every 2 weeks. Your liquidity is so high. So you can grow as fast as you want to. So what have we done? We've engineered the infrastructure of the business so that you don't have bottlenecks to your growth. The question now is, how big do you want it to be?
This is so key. Hustlers, you got to rewatch this video, because what we're getting out of this is basically how to approach and make a company.
Yes.
And even if you just wanted to have a business, we're learning how to properly approach this. You know, we're thinking about things beyond. This is so much deeper than just, oh, this is what the ROI I want on this product. And
right.
This is repricing, and you know, let's click and see the repricing activity. This is bigger than that. And this is what's going to really get us to where we're trying to go. If you want to grow your business, guys, you got to stay tuned. You got to rewatch this. This is actually part of a series we're putting together. But I'm so glad, Dillon, I'm so glad that you got us thinking conceptually about it. It's not just about getting a repricer so that I could, you know, get more sales. Why? What is the whole, you know, system that you're putting together?
Exactly.
This is so key, because how many of us, including me, have been on Amazon for years and we're not growing? Why? Because we're not approaching it the right way. And just because you go out there and get a tool, if you don't have your mind right, you're not gonna get what you want out of it.
Exactly. You know, so like, you know, we can get more granular, but like, listen, at the end of the day, repricing will absolutely help. Like, I know we're talking like broad scale here, like, you know, like metric wise, we tend to see, if you're coming from no repricing tool to repricing, 30 to 40% increase in sales. That's what we tend to see. If you're coming from another tool, it tends to be 20 to 30%, depending on the tool you're coming from. So like, yeah, will it have an impact? Absolutely. Like all the stuff we've been talking about, like, I know it sounds kind of like odd, but repricing puts you in a position to be able to do those things, right? Because you need to free your time up, right? You need to make sure that you have a system in place to make sure that your inventory is selling through quickly. And that's where repricing comes in, right? That's the thing that I think a lot of sellers don't understand about repricing. They just hear the term repricing and it's like, I get it, you update my pricing. It's like, no, but it's like yes, but there's also so much more that's going on. And that's the stuff that we're talking about here, right? It's like, it's really not just the repricing itself. That's incredibly important and that's fantastic. It's like, what comes next though, right? What does that enable you to do once that's set up? It's like, okay, now we're in a whole different like stratosphere, a whole different sphere, right? Of what's possible. And that's where I want you to understand. It's like, get started with repricing, absolutely. But know that like that's step one. Step two is like, it's going to sit on top of that, right? It's like repricing becomes that foundation outside of your inventory, of course, right? So it's like, you got inventory, amazing repricing. And then it's like, what can I sit on top of these things, right? What can I build from there with? And that's to me where it gets like really, really exciting.
I think that is just super key, because, you know, when you start to think, okay, what is this automation doing for me? Essentially, it's freeing up your time. So now what are you going to do with that time? You want to spend it on the processes that give you the most bang.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Hold on one second. I'm going to pause the recording for just one. Okay, so what I wanted to do for this little portion, Dillon, I did have some questions, and a lot of it might be a little redundant because you've covered so much, but I do want to make sure I hit some major points for the working class hustlers. So let's kind of rehash, because we really need to identify who this product, when we talk about Aura.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and then I want your take on it. In my opinion, it would be for someone who's ready to take their business to the next level. We talked about it. You know, you need to control the buy box where there is a buy box, because there's not always a buy box, but that repricer can still work for you either way.
Yeah, no, we can unsuppress buy boxes all day long. So like the way we design strategies is to automatically handle suppressed buy boxes, just because it happens and it's just, again, not worth your time to fix. We'll do it for you. You know, to be very specific about when you should say, like, I need to start looking, or when it's like, hey, now's not a good time. What we tend to see and recommend is if you're under 25 SKUs or under $5,000 consistently, and by consistent, I mean like probably 3 months, in sales, in monthly sales, it's not a good time. You need to wait. And listen, I get it. Like I'm one of the founders, but I'll tell you real quick when it's not a good fit, because for me, it's like I've been a seller and so has my co-founder. So we 1000% get it. I don't want you to jump into a tool until you can actually get the ROI from it. I'd rather you wait 3 months and then come back and then stick with us for the next 3 years, right? So if you're, again, if you're above 25 SKUs, above 5,000 per month in sales, now's a really good time to start having this discussion. And the way we have it structured too, by the way, is like we're what's called an ungated trial, meaning we don't require a credit card upfront. So what I always say is like, if you're unsure, you could absolutely jump in free and make an additional like $100, which covers the cost. Like, right. So we try to make it super frictionless for people. So, and listen, if you jump in and it's too soon and it's just not working out for you, no harm, no foul. It's all good, right? Come back later. But what we try to say is wait until we can really have an impact. And then that's when we invite people to come on.
Yeah. And hustlers, there is a link down in the description where you can get much more than the advertised 14-day free trial, more than double that. So it's been, these guys have been great. We need to take advantage of that. But I appreciate the candor in that, letting us know, hey, it's not, everybody isn't ready. This one, and again, I've followed you for a long time. I know you like to geek out on this. How often are prices changing on Amazon? Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to do it myself. Is it even possible? You know what I mean? If you're going to stay
your
on
thumbs
top,
don't move fast enough. No, I mean, so for us, it's hard to say, right? Because we're only able to see the data on like our users, and like granted, we're like pretty sizable now, but like compared to the entire like Amazon marketplace, like we're very small. So in terms of number, I can't really say, but what I can say is on your average listing, where there's enough competition, I would say probably once every minute. Once every minute, you have at least one price change, right? And what ends up happening is you have one, and then that triggers 5, right? So now we actually had like 6 within like a minute and a half. For us, man, you can't keep up fast enough, because it's not just, oh, I updated my pricing, I can go move on with my day. You need to think through, okay, I updated my pricing, who's now going to update because I updated my pricing?
Right.
And then what do I need to do now, right? Okay, so now we're playing this infinite game, and you certainly don't have the time to play that game, right? Because again, this is a penny task, right? So this is why, I mean, for some of our sellers, I mean, we're doing tens of thousands of price changes per minute just for that seller.
Wow.
Because they have so much competition, so many SKUs, right? Some listings might only update once every 15 minutes. That's definitely feasible on a very low friction, low competition listing. But it's a lot. And the thing to keep in mind, right? It's not how many times, it's how fast can you react.
Yes.
Right? Because it's not just, well, I updated mine and I can do that. Okay, but what happens when it's 2 a.m. and somebody took the buy box from you for the next 4 hours? Right. And now you're relying upon yourself to jump in there and get back into the buy box. But what could have happened within that 4 hours is we might have repriced you 200 times. Right. Like, or once. It definitely could have been once, right? But at least and it's not just repricing down, right? We did kind of talk about that. It's also going up, right? So we have what's called the maintenance section. So the maintenance section will say, if I'm in the buy box, I want you to do something. And you can tell it what to do, but we typically recommend that you say, go to the next lowest seller and reprice below them by 1 penny. Why are you doing that? You're increasing your net profits, but staying in the buy box, right? So it's not like you just don't have enough time to optimize, one, from a speed perspective and keeping up with everything 24/7, which a computer can do, and we do. But also understanding when you can go up, right? Understanding, like, just because you see that you're in the buy box does not necessarily mean that's a good thing.
Right.
Or it knows that and can see that and then can react to that.
Have you ever thought about it? And this just came to my mind. You speak about opportunity cost. Have you ever thought about the individual sales? Somebody wants to buy some Centrum vitamins. At that moment, that customer, you lost. If it was at 2 a.m. and you couldn't reprice, he's gone. You missed it and it's over.
Oh yeah.
You can't get that back. You know, you might be I'm sitting on 12 of these. Well, that's one that could have been gone. You know,
and not just one, right? Like you could have moved all 12 in the next 2 hours.
You could have.
Right?
So it's opportunity cost on that level as well. Let me ask you this, because people who get into repricers, they have choices. So what would you say are the elements of a good repricer? What does it need to do in order for you to say, okay, that's a good repricer?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's speed, right? Okay. Listen, you can go get a cheap repricing tool. And it sounds great because you're like, hey, I'm saving money. No, you're actually giving up money is what you're doing. Why though, right? It's because a lot of your cheaper ones will throttle you. They'll say, we can reprice you once every 15 minutes or once every 5 minutes. What you want and what the benchmark should be is instant repricing.
Wow. The
moment a price change happens, the system should receive that, see if it needs to make an update and push that back. Now, it's going to take a minute or two for Seller Central to get that into their system and then update it. But within the system that is repricing, the actual repricing tool, that needs to be instant. So if you're not doing instant repricing, you're not saving money. You're missing out on sales.
I got you.
Right. So the analogy I like to give is if the point or the goal is to win a drag race, like with cars, right? You choose the Honda Civic, which is cheaper, or the Ferrari, 400 grand. You could choose the cheaper option. And you're like, hey, I'm saving some money. This is great. But you didn't win the race. So it's irrelevant is what I'm saying, right? It makes no sense. And the price difference between, 15-minute increments in instant is not so large that it's not doable for most people, which brings me to number two. When we set out with Aura, I didn't want it to be the cheapest and I didn't want it to be the most expensive, because like both of those hurt the end user, right? If we're too cheap, then we can afford good, support people, right? This is why a lot of your cheap repricing tools outsource their customer support. They can't afford actual people in the United States. If you're too expensive, then people just can't afford you. And it's like, yeah, you got great engineers, but you have like hardly enough users to like have an impact. For us, we wanted it to be the value play, right? We wanted it to be where we're low enough to where you can afford to be like, we can afford to be the first repricing tool you use, but also the last one you use, because we charge enough to have good talent and build a great product, right? And so number three for me, it's usability all day long, right? Repricing is actually a very complex thing. So you can choose to build your product to be complex from a usability perspective and be like, you can do all the things. And it's like, that's great. But most Amazon sellers are not tech nerds like we are. So it's like, it needs to be very usable and you need to be able to jump in, get up and running. Like, I want you to be able to jump into Aura and be repricing within 10 minutes. And you can do that.
That's the next question I had. Yeah. How easy is it to set up?
It's not difficult.
You're a geek, you know about software and you know how complex they can be. They're not all user friendly. I've been using Aura probably 2 years myself, maybe more. And I didn't even realize you've kind of updated the onboarding process to make it easier.
Yeah. So I'm a big data person. I think you need to be it as a business owner. And just looking at our conversion rates, right? Our conversion rates are fantastic in SaaS. I'm actually looking at benchmarks, which I'm proud of, right? It means we're doing a good job and we built a great product. But first and foremost, I'm looking at key metrics, right? We did talk about KPIs earlier, right? For me, I'm looking at the percentage of people that start a trial and connect a marketplace, and then the ones that connect a marketplace and then create a strategy. I'm trying to figure out where people are getting stuck, right? I'm looking at those bottlenecks. And then what I realized is our onboarding was okay, but honestly, it was built like like a year before I updated it. And it's like, I've learned so much more. So like, we need to update this thing. Okay. So I went back through, updated it, watched the metrics increase, right? So obviously it's more effective. And I streamlined it. I made it very much like, hey, here's the only thing you need to do right now. You do that thing, then it goes, hey, here's the only thing next you need to do now, right? And there's really only three things, right? You need to connect your marketplace. You need to create a strategy. You need to toggle on repricing.
See, back when I started, I think you had to download some, upload some. I just forget. It
Yeah.
wasn't impossible. And actually, one thing that impressed me back then, you made yourself available to help
Yeah.
on board. I found that extraordinary.
Yeah, and that's still somewhat the case. So I personally onboarded the first 300 users myself, which was like 300 hours. I can't do that now,
right.
but Finn, who runs support day to day, crushes it. So listen, like this is the last thing that I will say is incredibly important. It's customer support. Listen, getting a cheap tool and having no support in using it is a recipe for disaster. That's why the vast majority of people that go that route end up coming to us, because they're like, at this point, I'm willing to pay a little bit more. Why? During business hours, and we're not 24/7. And I'm actually proud that we're not 24/7 support, because we don't outsource anything. James built the actual product. Our co-founder built the product, not outsourced. Customer support, Finn, well, he's not here right now because he went to the gym, does support. Right. So from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, Eastern Standard Time, you're getting Finn or you're getting me into the discussion. And we're going to do a great job because we measure that. Right. And our average response time is within 10 minutes during business hours. So not only is it like, hey, can you get help? It's like, you can get help quick. And I tell every new user, and I'll tell everybody here, if you got 30 minutes worth of work you need to get done in Aura for some reason, and you only have 5, spend the 5 minutes telling us what you need to get done or want to get done, and we'll do it for you. When you work with Aura, you get a team of repricing nerds on your side. We don't expect you to do it yourself. We got you. And listen, if you're like, hey, this is really just not making sense to me, that's cool. Let us know that. And we'll be like, hey, can we jump into a Zoom call and let's answer some questions, and we'll do it for you. We have no problem jumping into your account over Zoom and saying, how do you want this to work? If you're like, I have no idea, like, can you recommend? Absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll create the strategy for you. We'll get everything connected, and we'll say, hey, by the time we're done with this call, you'll be repricing, and you'll understand what we're doing. Even more importantly,
this is amazing. There's one thing that just I wanted to add before we kind of set up for what we're going to be doing together in the future, guys. To the working class hustlers, I just want you to know, and this is from my personal experience, when you begin to use an effective repricer, I liken it to being pulled up from the minor league up to the majors.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I never thought possible the velocity, the sales velocity. When you come up to that next level, it's a whole nother game, and you're in another league, because now you're among those that have invested in order to be, relevant out there. Now you've got people, and I used to be the same way. I set my price and I would forget it. And in 90 days, if it didn't sell, I had my own disposition.
90 days though.
Do that. But you know what? You're missing out on so much opportunity. If you really want to grow this business, you have to stop thinking like that individual entrepreneur, and you have to start thinking processes. You got to start thinking about the bread and butter, which is that capital. You guys, this is going to be a whole series. The next ones, we're going to actually dive into the software, but I'm going to be constantly hammering it home. The software means nothing if you don't have your systems together, if you don't understand why you're using it. And it goes far beyond just to be changing some prices so I can say, oh, I got to sell. No, if you want to grow your business and really get some velocity going, why? So that you can get that capital back quicker, so that you can reinvest it, so that you can get it to compound. That is what this is all about, guys. But we're gonna put together an entire series. And here's the other thing, and I want you to touch a little bit on that, Dillon. Dillon, I think I'd like to kidnap him because he geeks out about not just repricers, about other processes that happen with your Amazon business. And hustlers, I'm here to tell you, I think we're going to learn a lot from this guy that goes far beyond this software. Just the thought process. He comes from the wholesale background, and there's just so much that we're going to get into. Again, make sure you use your resources down in the description. You got him right here. You see, he's a genuine guy. I've been with the software. So if you know you're ready, we already described the guy who's ready for this. If you're ready to get on, there's no reason why you shouldn't.
Especially with the offer you got.
Exactly. I don't even want to say it.
I know. I was like, I'm not gonna say it, but you'll figure it out. Just click through, you'll figure it out.
But yeah, use the link in the description if you're ready, and you'll be good to go. Hustlers, if you want to contact me, you can always text the words Working Class Hustler to the number on your screen. And that way, if you have any questions, anything I can help you with, that's my cell number. You can reach me. There's so much more to unpack, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video of this series.